I guess we're live, yo. Hey, we're pushing the button like we get ready to talk to ourselves. Welcome to the Chicken Box, everybody. It is another beautiful Thursday. If you woke up and are alive, just smile inside. It helps you get through the day because if you watch the news or anything else, you could frown a little bit. So hopefully you're smiling on the in and outside. I'm your co-host, Impeccable, along with Dr. Francis Draper and Jay Jackson. We are here in the Chicken Box. If you are from the DMV, you know what a Chicken Box is. If you're not, you have something similar in your city, in the hood at least. 4 wings and fries. I don't know how you put it. Is it styrofoam or is it in a box? But we have it in the box. You know, I think we have it in some styrofoam too. Ketchup, salt, and pepper. I'm always hungry. I need to start eating before this show because as soon as I start talking about chicken, I get hungry. Dr. Draper, it's been a while since the three of us have all been together. How are you?
I'm fine, and now you've made me hungry, but I do have my bottle of water, so that's good. Good to see you, Impeccable. Good to see you, Jay Jackson. There is a lot of going on around us, so it's nice to see you guys and to talk about something that is serious yet very important, and not yet, and very important to all of us on today. So good to be with you.
Jay, how you feeling before we get started? We're just a little wellness check, make sure everybody's good.
Exhausted, I think, is probably the best word to use. But ever vigilant. So let's just keep going.
Well, last week we learned 3 questions, Jay. So how do you really feel?
Not as happy as I appear to be.
No, we were doing a wellness check last week, and how everybody said something like, "Yeah, I'm good." You know, somebody say, "How you doing?" They just give the regular
stock
standard answer, but everybody's really not good. So everybody needs just a little wellness checkup. But we're gonna get into today. We're talking about Black people versus advocacy. That sounds like a very hard word to say, and I've said it probably. It's easier to say advocate than advocacy, I guess. But we're talking about advocacy, and we have a special guest with us today who is near and dear to her heart, and she's pushing our agenda forward in ways that can inspire others to do the same, to make change makers. Let's welcome to the Chicken Box, Corryn Freeman. Corryn, how are you? Welcome to the Chicken Box.
Well, I am very glad to be here with you all. I am tired. I am angry. I am frustrated. But I'm here, right? And I know a lot of us when we do the wellness check, we say, "Oh, I'm well," and keep it moving. I feel like now more than ever, we have to be tuned in to what's really going on, because those feelings are going to guide us to where we need to go.
Yeah. Well, welcome to the Chicken Box, the Future Coalition as Executive Director. Jay, why don't you just give a little bit about her, because she's I'm sure going to tell us all about herself. But we'd like to give you your flowers, Corryn, since you're on the Chicken Box. Jay.
Corryn Freeman is a Florida-based social activist, political operative, and accomplished social change agent. She serves as the executive director of the Future Coalition, an organization whose mission is to provide young change makers with the resources they need to propel transformational change. Corryn is the co-founder and vice president of Black Violin Foundation, an arts education foundation that is dedicated to empowering youth by working with them in the communities to provide access to quality music programs and encourage creativity and innovation. And then rest of your resume of sorts is extremely long and extensive, but you've done work doing sort of political work as far as in Florida with the Collective PAC. You've done state organizing. You've also you were a former state director for the Florida for All and Florida for All Education Fund. And I would have to say you are probably pretty darn busy over these last couple of days. So I'm very interested to talk with you, and I'm sure all of us are, about the Future Coalition, which is one of your many projects, but sort of the focus for today. So thank you.
Definitely my biggest one. So Future Coalition is an organization, as you stated, that resources young change makers to propel transformational change in a myriad of ways. So one way that we do this is through fiscal sponsorship, meaning we have many young people who are organizing themselves and are really creating organizations that don't have C3 or C4 status. We allow them to utilize our tax status. We help build up their back end of their organizations to help them raise grant money to do the work that they need to do on the ground. The vast majority of those leaders, we have 17 fiscal projects right now, are women, femme, and of color, leading climate work, political work, all kinds of racial justice work at the intersections of all of the things. So that's one way Future Coalition resources young change makers. Another way that we're resourcing young change makers is through civic and political engagement. We have what we call our Take It Back network, where we have youth-led and youth-serving organizations across the country who come together to have conversations about their civic engagement and political programming. And through the Take It Back network, they have access to grant money to continue funding, like their civic engagement programming that supports youth serving candidates or young candidates that are progressive and aligned with Future Coalition's vision. And Future Coalition is also working to create state tables that are youth-led or youth-serving in multiple states to focus on a targeted electoral strategy in 2026 to help us mitigate some of these issues that we're experiencing right now, and planning to do a ballot initiative strategy in 2028, because the ballot initiatives are still the way that the will of the people can be heard and we can have a major impact. So that's what Future Coalition is, and that's what we do. We also do a lot of commentary and meaning making for young people about the moment that we're in. So explaining what an executive order is versus the US Constitution. What does one mean versus the other? And telling young people how they can get involved and stay engaged.
That's something that older people need to know as well. So I'm curious, Corryn, thank you for the work that you're doing. And
Yes.
hello to all of our viewers on today as well. We welcome to the Chicken Box. We're glad you're here. Put your questions for Corryn, your comments, please, in the chat. If you're watching us on Facebook or YouTube or LinkedIn, we want to hear from you. Corryn, back up a little bit for us and let us know, how did you get involved in this work? When did this start for you? Or what piqued your interest?
Wow. Well, I say I was born into it, right? So I was born I have a dad that was a pastor, a pastor in Baltimore, and a community leader, local NAACP chapter president in Howard County, where I'm from. And I had a mom who always led foundation work. My mom was the executive director of the Community Foundation in Washington, D.C. And then she went on to lead the National Civil Rights Museum as their CEO or executive director. And now she's at the Lewis Museum. I grew up in a household that really, I remember going to the voting booths with my parents. My parents took me to go vote with them every time. And I remember it was like the second Million Man March. My dad was a treasurer for it. And I would go to the meetings and I would sit on his lap and we would go to the march. And I met Dorothy Height, and I just was a part of what we did, right? So my parents, social justice, community advocacy was just bred into me from the work at church, and doing community events was what we did. And so I've always been justice oriented, and it only feels natural for me to be in this kind of work.
That's good. So a LinkedIn viewer just asked, was it an offshoot of the 2017 Women's March?
Future Coalition? Yes, it is. it was.
Somebody asked on LinkedIn who's watching.
Yes, March. So it's founded by Future Coalition, was born of March On, which supported the Women's March. And then Katie came and founded Future Coalition, which was a project of March On, and we've converted the infrastructure to be Future Coalition.
Excellent.
Mm-hmm.
Corryn, I have a quick question. You mentioned your work on ballot initiatives.
Mm-hmm.
Is that a 50 state sort of strategy, or are you focused on certain states, or where you are in Florida, or because there was, obviously some major ballot initiatives this last go round out of Florida very specifically that unfortunately did not pass. But I'm just curious as to where your focus is.
Well, it's an intention for Future Coalition. Future Coalition historically has not done ballot initiative work, but the idea is around ranked choice voting and making that a real option in as many states as possible. Ranked choice voting has already been banned in a number of states because of the potential power that it has in shifting the dynamic of our elected representation, the power shift that it could have. But I firmly believe that ranked choice voting ballot initiatives are the path forward to getting real progressives elected and allowing for representation beyond the current two-party system. I think that the two-party system has proven itself to be less than favorable to people who are more progressive and those who are most marginalized, while the Democratic Party does allow for us to make some strides and really kind of maintain a level of stability. The types of progress that we need, ideally things like universal health care, right? Student loan debt forgiveness, total student loan debt forgiveness, some overhauls we might see from candidates in other parties, since we can't seem to push the Democratic Party to the left.
Fair enough. And can you do me a favor? Just please explain just quickly for folks who don't know what ranked choice voting is. I don't think it's a super common knowledge.
No, yeah, no problem. So ranked choice voting allows you to vote beyond the party system. So it allows you, when you get your ballot, right, you go in to vote on election day, all of the candidates who are registered and have filed are accessible to you. And you choose, like, between 1 and 5, how you would like to vote. So you have a top candidate, a second candidate, a third candidate, and you rank in that way. And when the tallies are totaled, the one who has the highest number is the one number of votes is the one that wins. It just creates additional opportunity for more candidates to have an equal playing field. The way that voting goes now is there's a primary. If you're a registered Democrat or Republican, you have the opportunity to dwindle the field down to the candidate that you want represented on your general election ballot. But ranked choice voting really allows you the opportunity to see the full scope of all of the candidates, and it puts them on an equal playing field for us to have more opportunity for choice.
Excellent. Yeah, I personally am a huge fan of ranked choice voting. And I think a lot of people, like I said, are not really quite aware of what it is. And it could actually do a lot to give people a real chance instead of just saying, well, or, sometimes it's a lot of times, when people go to vote, well, I like this person, but they don't have a chance of winning. Well, I'm going to vote for this person, even though like maybe they have a better chance, but I don't really support them. So you can say, okay, well, here's your number one choice is the person who you think is not likely to win. And then your number two is the person who you think may get more votes. But if everyone is doing that, then it can shift the dynamic considerably. So, and we've seen that in some state level races. So thank you for that.
I just want to name like the timeline on this. It's not for 2026. To me, the timeline on this has to be 2028 that it is on the ballots. So what needs to happen is over a multitude of states, as many as Future Coalition can be in community with state-based organizations, to collect petitions or to advocate the legislature to put ranked choice voting on the ballot. It can go on the ballot in 2026. This is a good strategy if a legislature is approving this for a ballot initiative versus if it's rooted in petition collection. Petition collection takes a good amount of time for that to happen. So hopefully between 2026 and 2028, we can move the population toward advocacy for ranked choice voting. And from, 2028, this 2030 is really the time that we would see the impact that it would have if we are able to do ranked choice voting in more states.
Okay.
Absolutely. If you just tuned in, this is the Chicken Box, and you are tuning in to Corryn Freeman. She is our special guest today, and we're talking about advocacy. I don't know why I'm having such a hard word with that. To be more of an advocate. Anyway, change makers out there. I forgot to say, this Chicken Box is powered by this little company. I never call it little company. This huge conglomerate media giant titan, the Afro-American newspaper, now Afro News, the best and the brightest Black media company in the world, over 132 years of serving, inspiring, and just bringing things to your mind that you don't think about on a regular basis. And we have the most extensive archive. So now, Corryn, you are now officially in the Afro archives. They used to be in newspapers, bound in books. Now they're digital. Digital files. We'll see what the future brings, what these will be when the future generations look back and see what was happening back in 2025. Advocacy. I know you talk about change makers and you work with children. What does change maker mean to you, Corryn?
A change maker is literally anyone who understands that they have power and they have a desire to wield it. That's a change maker. Anyone who realizes that the blood that flows through them gives them an opportunity to do whatever they want, that's a change maker. A change maker is someone who is unafraid to innovate, someone who is not afraid to speak truth to power and is willing to try and potentially fail, but use that information to create something even better for the future. Those are change makers. And I think that we all are change makers, and it's our responsibility in this current moment. We all have got to acknowledge that we do have power and that we have a role to play in keeping each other safe. So, yeah, those are the change makers to me.
I love it. Generationally, how do you see the mindset of the change makers you come in contact with?
What do you mean generationally? How are they?
From the boomers to the Z.
So it's interesting. So we'll start at the boomers, seniority. I find that the boomer change makers have created like an established process, and there's like a flow and there's an order to things. And I think that there is definitely power in abiding in the structure and operating in the flow to get the thing done, right? And then I'll say the Gen X and the millennial change makers, these are kind of the question askers about the system. They're the ones who are, I'd say, super curious about like how we can make improvements or why the thing is operating in this way. And let me tell you about these Gen Zs, baby. The Gen Zs is just ready to tear it down. The Gen Zs are coming in hot with new ideas, just a fire that is in them for far, like very left-leaning progress. They have a strong moral compass is the way I would define Gen Zs. And they're unafraid to say the thing. They're unafraid to do the march. But I think that they have a lot of energy, and they could use some intergenerational wisdom and leadership around the right way to harness that energy to be effective in making the change. But that's how I see and experience the change makers.
Right. I mean, that's a good point that you brought up about that, because sometimes the Gen Z says they're in their own civil war with the Gen X or the boomers, like, because of how maybe the stereotype is or the mindset of the Gen X or the boomer looking at the Gen Z. And it could just be how they dress, that they now judge them on their mindset, and it becomes like they're not listening to them, and Gen Z's not listening to Gen X. And so instead of using the wisdom that has been passed down, they're missing it. And so we're missing that connection to bring together. And of course, a house divided always, doesn't really stand. It falls.
I think that's true. I find though that what Gen Z, because I'm a millennial, right? What Gen Z needs is for those of us who are older. Future Coalition is an intergenerational organizer, Future Coalition is an intergenerational organization that believes in Gen Z's power to lead, right? Our responsibility as an older generation is to hear them first. First hear. Our job is to listen to them first and to really like actively listen and to take in what they have, right? And from there, we have the opportunity to provide the wisdom. But I know as a millennial who grew up in the Baptist church, I was taught that you listen to what the elders say, right? And I think that it is important that we actually do a bit of a shift, and we understand that young people, just because they're young does not mean that they don't have wisdom or information or a path forward, and they need us to hear them for us to be able to guide them for the intergenerational piece to work. And I also think like young people need space to fail. Like you respect them enough to, it might not be the best. You advise them against it. They want to do it, let them do it, let them learn. And that failure kind of further refines their leadership.
I also think that all of us were Gen Z at one time.
Yes.
Or Alpha Gen at one time.
Yes.
All of us, regardless of where we fall now, at one time, the boomers, when you had the H-Rap Browns and others who wanted to tell us that the revolution is coming and it's on, so you had that mindset. I had a younger person say to me just last week, they're looking, to your point, Corryn, they're looking to the older generations to help them, to help them organize. They've got the passion, right? They've got the fire. They know that something's not right. So they need a future coalition or somebody to help them to take all of that and package it in a way that's going to not fizzle out, not just be a flash in the pan. We had a demonstration, we raised some money and now we're gone, but to sustain it. Are you finding that as well, that younger people are looking for, or they're looking for a way to harness that energy, or do you have to kind of lead them to harness that energy? What are you finding?
They need support in harnessing it. So through Future Incubator, they kind of come to us because they know they need some infrastructural support in order to sustain, right? To meet the mission that they have. They're looking for it. And through Future Consulting, we connect them to consultants who can help advise them strategically, whether it's financial, whether it's strategic planning, whether it's visioning and organizing. We connect them to those resources so that they can thrive. And we are really seeing so much growth in some of our Future Incubator projects. We have like Black Girl Environmentalists, which is an amazing organization led by a young woman named Wawa Githiru, engaging Black girls and young Black women around environmental and climate issues, creating another level of climate consciousness in the Black community about climate inequity in our community.
Which is a lot of that. So you're national, right? You're all over?
Yes, we service the United States.
So how do young people engage? How do you recruit and how do they engage with you?
Okay, so online. So we're really on social media. You can find us on TikTok, on Instagram. We're also on X at Future Coalition. And you can visit futurecoalition.org and sign up for our email list. This is how you get into our most general activist pipeline. And through that email list, you will see all of the opportunities to engage with us digitally and have an opportunity to engage with us in our Slack channel.
Excellent. I'd like to pivot over to, you have, honestly, I have so many questions, but you have on your sort of news part of the Future Coalition page, you have 3 sort of major sort of press releases that you've done over the last couple of days. Again, it's been a very busy month so far. And one of them, your latest one, is about the Future Coalition condemns Trump administration's rollback of DEI policies as a setback for civil rights. I kind of want to dig into this a little bit because on the 21st of January, literally his first full day in office, Trump signed an I know, unfortunately for all of us, he signed a executive order basically ending EEO, which is, equal opportunity employment, which has been around since 1965, right? It's a massive blow to civil rights. And I'm curious, you're quoted here in saying this action isn't just an attack on federal workers, it's an attack on every marginalized community striving for opportunity. And you have sort of a generational call to this, right? Like what are your ways that you want to address these issues? How do you think Americans through the Future Coalition or otherwise can push back on this?
I'm in a 15,000.
So I'm curious as to your thoughts of like, what is it that young people can do, and what are you guys working on to kind of push back against these this sort of destruction of DEI work?
Well, what we have to do, one, is be informed. So know what the power of this executive order is and how far it can actually reach, what he can actually do. So one, understand what's actually possible. The next thing that you can do is talk to your representative and let them know that this is not okay and that they cannot do that, and tell your representatives, your federal representatives, that they need to stand in that man's way as much as possible to prevent further destruction. That's another way. Something else that we need people to do is, like, they're seeing all of these executive orders that are coming down like rain. We need you to be willing to run for office and to do right by people. Are you willing to step up, take the mantle, and run for office? If Donald Trump can qualify, everyone can qualify. Right. All of us are qualified. Everyone here is qualified.
Overqualified.
Overqualified, right? To do the work to bring about the change that we want to see. And many calls for businesses that are private businesses, continue to make your commitment to diversity, equity, and inclusion. Make sure that you still have equal opportunity employment, that you are abiding by, and not only abiding by because the federal government told you so. I think in this administration, I have deep concern about our ability to actually fight back using the political institutional structures that exist. This administration seems to be quite hard-headed. What we have to do is look for solutions beyond the political infrastructure and think about how we are showing up for each other, for ourselves, and preparing ourselves to be the next wave of politicians that are going to restore this.
Right. Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, it's interesting. There's sort of, like we talked about when you first got on, everyone is exhausted, right? Because there's sort of this overflow of information, this overflow of actions, mm-hmm. which is on purpose, right? It's a way to shut the system down by everyone just going, just turn off. And then they just go, okay, forget it, because it's just too much, right? And it's understandable why everyone reacts that way. So I appreciate your work on that. I do have just one quick other question.
Sure.
You mentioned you're doing this work with young Black girls and climate change work, right? Which I think is incredibly important. And this is one of many things that I think young people absolutely should lead on, because it's the world they're inheriting. And mm-hmm. I think they get it better than anybody, right? It's like, yeah, we're going to be here and everyone else is not going to be here. So we got to care about this. Do you think that, I feel like the conversation around climate change has often been, that's tomorrow me's problem, that's future me's problem. And then especially in the Black community, I don't see as much of an urgency until the California wildfires. And then it felt like, oh, okay, this is very real. And I think a lot of Americans don't really think about these things, because it's like, it's always happening over there type of thing. But did you find that you got a sort of an upswing of interest in dealing with this since the fires, especially dealing in Altadena and stuff like that?
Well, we deal in young people, and the young people we know understand this, right? So like I'm finding that, like, young people, the progressive, we are all aligned on what this is. Are we seeing overall a larger amount of engagement in climate advocacy overall, just organizational, beyond our organization, just in the climate movement? Yes. I think the hurricane that struck and the way that the destruction it took in Asheville, seeing that is insane. Hearing about how many, like, Miami is sinking. It's not solid ground, and then the fires that we're witnessing, the flooding that we're seeing internationally, odd weather everywhere, I think is making people more alert to climate change. But something that you're mentioning that I think is important to note is just the mentality around that happens over there. I think Americans have this mentality with everything.
Yes, I agree with you.
We have this mentality with climate. We have this mentality with fascism. We have this mentality with dictatorship. And I am here to remind everybody that everything that we're experiencing, including the rules that we choose to follow, are all made up from someone's imagination. someone created it in their head and figured out how to make it real. And anyone can imagine anything, which means anything can happen at any time. And when Dr. King says, the arc of the moral universe is long and it bends towards justice, it bends that way because we pull it that way. If we want to keep a democracy and not enter fascism, we must ensure that we are doing the deeds that protect democracy. Absolutely. If we want to restore climate, we have to understand how our spending habits, our consumption impacts, our choices impact the environment, and we have to make aligned decisions with restoring the environment. Anything can happen to you. Stop thinking that happens over there, and know that you are always at risk if you are not aware, and be willing to step up to make the difference.
Now, that was a mic drop, right? So thank you very much. And the other thing I'd love to hear your opinion on, and it's a little, not a little, it's a lot. This is a very important issue to us as well here at the Afro. So when you see the kinds of things you see that are impacting the environment, all of this flurry of executive orders, not just about the environment, but DEI, which is now being equated with incompetence, right? So media has such an important role to play. And in the Black press, which is taken for granted, by the way, and probably some of the work you're doing is taken for granted as well. Can you say a little bit about how Future Coalition and how people are, I know you have a training, or is there training there to talk about how to influence, impact social media, other media? Is that even a topic of discussion?
Well, Future Coalition had its creator network that we really were using during the electoral cycle. And we do intend to bring this back to provide adequate information. But it is so important to support independent media, to support Black thought leaders. Black people been telling us the direction that we were headed. Angela Davis wrote on Palestine about the relationship America has to Palestine and how that indicates what the U.S. government is going to do. I mean, Octavia Butler wrote Parable of the Sower. That's not media per se, but like, we are the ones that are the visionaries. We have a unique critical viewpoint. And I think it is really important that we continue to support independent media. And Future Coalition is planning a number of conversations and trainings for young people who are seeking to become what I call digital validators on the internet, to kind of give this information, the right information to the people, so people understand the power that they have and what opportunities exist for them to show up to kind of stop this madness.
Sounds like a plan, because when you look at the way people are controlling the message is so important, and having it to be an accurate message as well.
It's necessary, the facts, the truth.
Right. Support the Black.
Going on, a whole lot of information is being spread, even with the executive orders and the federal judges saying, sir, you can't do that. Like, you can't, just because you say it does not mean that you actually have the authority to do this. There is still process that has to be followed.
Yeah, we're debating whether the 14th Amendment is constitutional. Okay, like what is the world in which we live in? It's bizarre to me. But
when I say it makes me angry, I am containing myself.
Look, I hear you. We can talk about this all
okay, this is contained.
This is a chicken box. We all try to contain ourselves, but it's also about mind control. So if I tell you enough times that something is not right, if I tell you enough times that white is better than Black, if I tell you enough times that diversity is equal to some kind of sin, if I tell you that enough times, then you parrot it, you live it, you do it, you legislate it, and it becomes the fact, even though it's not true. And so it's the critical thinking around all of it, because the issues are going to change. But it sounds to me like you also are preparing young people to critically think about things and then act based on not what somebody else is telling them, but on how they really can unpack certain things. Is that pretty accurate?
Ideology is is literally the base level. Belief, you ever read Atomic Habits? Your belief system, what you believe dictates the choices that you make, whether you're aware of your beliefs or not, right? So it's critical to understand what people believe to be true. Whether it's true or not doesn't matter. It's what they're believing.
It's irrelevant whether it's relevant, but when people get a hold of what they believe, it doesn't matter. That's what they hold on to.
Right.
And so young people, the attacks really are not towards whether, the millennials, the Gen X, the boomer in the room. The attack is on the Gen Z and Alpha trying to control their mind.
Yes.
What they believe.
And it's our responsibility. Again, we all got skin in this game. How are we using our power to transfer the information that we have about our history and about the way things should be working? How are we passing down the ability to critically think to people? How are we, instead of telling them the answer, ask them some, like, what are the questions, right? Create some questions around this, right? And making space for the innovation. So really, like, getting into the critical thought piece, teaching new beliefs that are empowering, that teach all people that you have a right to exist. All people have a right to exist. It does not matter your gender, it does not matter your race, it does not matter your legal status in this nation. You have a right to be here and you have human rights. And if we can impart that into people and give them the tools that they need to fight in order to make that a reality, we can see a different future in 50 years.
Yeah, absolutely. So I do want to go back for a second here. What is the plan, or, this is a broad question, I'm sorry, but I'm not so sure I don't think any of us quite know what the world looks like 4 years from now, right? If the country 4 years from now, what that looks like. How do you see yourselves as an organization or as a coalition setting up these young people for what I would argue is, if progressives are allowed to get into power, depending on what happens in this world, if they are able to obtain power again, it is obviously not going to be enough to, like, let's go back to 2000 and, like, let's go back to the standard. There is going to need to be a fundamental heavy shift of what the country wants to be, or what these young people want the country to look like. How are you working to prepare them for what that looks like? Because that is kind of an unprecedented thing, right? You see in other countries where you have massive upheavals and then the country turns in huge ways. How do you see your organization helping young people to kind of get ready for that? Because I think that's a conversation that's not happening enough.
I appreciate that. So, like, Future Coalition, we see ourselves as a space for connection and imagination, right? So we are the safe space for this. So one, we are connecting you to other like-minded people. And then we're also holding space to create vision, right? So I think the Republicans have done a really good job of imagining. They've imagined this. Like, when Roe v. Wade was decided, they were already thinking about how they were going to overturn it. And it took them decades to do it, but they did it because it was through a process of collective imagination, plan building, and then implementation, right? So our goal is to connect with as many young activists, organizations in states, and then nationally, to collectively imagine what is the future that we actually want. Not how do we get back to 2000, because that wasn't what I wanted. I ain't never seen what I wanted yet from America. How do we get what we want, right? What is it that we want? And then building the idea of building the plan for how we get there, and thinking, what are the vehicles that need to be created to get us there? I don't know that the left democratic progressive infrastructure even has all of the vehicles set up and connected in order to get us to that future. So that's what Future Coalition is doing. To get us to this place, by holding space for the imagination and kind of being the connector for the plan to form, for us to do the unprecedented thing.
Right. I've long thought about, like, what is the progressive version of Project 2025? Like, what does that look like? Right.
We don't have it.
You don't have it, right? And to me, I always find that, like, especially in democratic politics, we're often focused on, okay, we got to like keep the ship afloat because every 4 to 8 years we allow people to drill a bunch of holes into it and then give it back, and then you're just scrounging to try to survive. And I always thought there should be organizations like yours and others, sort of coming together. Who are the folks like, all right, we're working on this massive plan, this 900-page plan or whatever it is. And when we get back into power, we start putting these things into place. Yes, we might have to keep the ship afloat, but we also have to do these things to kind of keep moving in a direction that we want to go. So I'm glad that there are organizations like yours that are building this, as you say, this imagination space, because that is important, because so much is concentrated on, we need to just get the ship running and then let's just try to keep everybody alive. And that's important. Obviously, it's serious work, but there's also needs to be some simultaneous work of how do we get the ship moving in this direction that we never have a chance to actually go to. And
the one thing I do want to say about having the ability to me, having space to imagine is a privilege, right? Yes. Having space, you have to be safe in order to imagine. You have to have all of your material needs met in order to have the freedom to imagine different. So like it's a privileged space, and the right is the right has the bulk of the power, right? They have the money, they have more money than the left does. And they have literally the political infrastructure. And many on the left, like you said, are fighting to survive, which does not create very much space for that work. And like I said, the money piece, like having the ability to make sure that people are okay so that they can spend the time to also deregulate your nervous system. A lot of this, might seem woo-woo, but a big piece of this is your own personal ability to feel safe and to heal, to be able to have this level of thought, to be free enough to do that. So I think that there's a lot of work that needs to be done. Money needs to be given to the left. Progressive funders need to start being able to fund this thought work, because the thought process is critical to us being able to just do the work. Don't just fund this one little project. What is this project connected to that creates a larger systems change is the way that we need to be thinking and funding ventures.
Welcome to the Chicken Box. I know we're getting into a great conversation, Dr. Draper. I don't want to cut you off mid-thought. I wanted to roll back to that 1965 because I saw a clip this morning that I wanted to share to see if we could all look at it, because we were saying how much information is going out that's misinformation that just tries to confuse people, that makes everybody tired. Let me see if hopefully I can pull this up. Hopefully I can do it, huh? I don't know why it's not coming. They don't want us to get this real information of this misinformation out, huh? All right, because typically, okay, let me try one more. This is the last time. We won't be defeated, people. All right. Do we have it? We do. Can you guys see it?
Yes.
Yes. I don't know if you guys saw this clip. I'm going to play it really quick and see if we can see how this plays against what we were just saying.
Going viral right now. So it's time that we set the record straight with what that actually means.
Okay, so this headline has been going viral for about the past day or so, and people are understandably upset and reasonably asking questions. So let's talk about it. First and foremost, there are a few things that people need to understand. Number one, your protections against discrimination, specifically in the workplace, did not start in 1965 through an executive order by the president, nor did they stop being modified in 1965 by the same executive order. So where do they come from? Your protections against discrimination in the workplace are either constitutionally based or they come from legislation passed by Congress. Notice neither one of those two things mentioned an executive order from the president. So where's the confusion? Let me explain it. Federal discrimination acts like Title VII of the Civil Rights Act of 1964 already prohibits employers from discriminating on the basis of race, color, religion, sexuality, a number of things. And that's only been modified throughout the court system over the years to include things like age and disabilities. So if all of that came from the Constitution and federal discrimination acts passed by Congress, What did this executive order actually talk about? This executive order basically mandates that federal contractors and federal contractors only have to have affirmative action programs in place in order to keep their federal contracts. This doesn't mean that now that this is revoked, that these same companies can start going out and discriminating on who they choose to and not to hire, because that's federal law. That's part of the Constitution. That has already been decided by the courts that it's illegal. So no, this has nothing to do with that. But you can expect to see a lot more misleading headlines like this because companies and people and blogs get paid to post stuff like this in order to stoke division.
So Trump.
Thoughts?
I mean, the information that he's giving is factual. I was just at dinner with my friends yesterday, and one of my friends said something. It was some analogy about how, you know, you're taught to believe that dogs can't play basketball, and we're complaining about the dogs that are dunking on us, right?
That's the Airbud rules.
Yeah, like, but the dogs can't play basketball, but the dog is dunking on us.
Yes.
So, like, yes, like that information is factually correct. And we have seen some of Donald Trump's executive orders get struck down by the courts already because they are a violation of the Constitution. You can't do that, sir. And thankfully, like, that's the way that it's supposed to go. However, if something goes to the Supreme Court and the Supreme Court decides from there, because they just have the ability to decide, they're supposed to be neutral, right? That something is not a violation of your constitutional rights, then it creates an ability for the law can be reinterpreted. It's about the interpretation of the extension of it, right? So he is correct that is factual information. However, it's all dependent on the ideologies of the judges that are in the federal court system.
Right. It's true. It's true without context. Right.
Yeah.
And to your point, a lot of these things that get pushed up, the immediate response is, well, it doesn't affect these other things. But that maybe not actually is the point. It is to start to chip away and to create questions. The idea of, yes, they're slamming on DEI things. It's like, well, that's just on the federal level. But at the same time, they're literally pressuring places like Costco, who has said that they're going to keep their DEI stuff, initiatives. So they start to question it. And to Dr. Draper's point, if you just keep saying a thing over and over and over again, and especially if people hear it from multiple places, they think, oh, well, these are all different people, but they're all working in the same group. They start to believe that these things are true. And so then DEI gets knocked down in a private organization, and you're like, how did we even get here? That's how you got there. So to me, facts without context is pretty much the same as a lie.
I would agree. Take the DEI executive order for a moment.
Yeah. How
many people have actually read the entire executive order? So in the middle of the executive order, there's a subsection that talks about private business. It talks about strongly suggesting and picking 9 sectors of private business and private foundations and nonprofits of a certain level and influence them to change their DEI policies. It is right in that same executive order. But what happens is we take the sound bite, we take the line, we take what somebody else says. We don't, as Corryn said earlier, we don't do the homework to dig down. So I kept hearing about this executive order, and I said, let me read it for myself. When I read it, it is much worse than what the headlines are saying if you dig down to how it is also meant to influence the public sector. So the Costco of the world stand firm right now, and we hope that they do. But if they don't get support from those of us who are inclined to shop there, it will impact them differently. So we have to look at the entire thing and not take the soundbite. That's what we talked about earlier. I also want to go back to something Corryn said that's not about this clip we just saw. She said it kind of quickly, but she said it 3 or 4 times. Funding is critical.
Yes.
So she can't do the work that she does without having, she can't award, I think your website said at least $2 million in grants to young people. I think that's what I read. Maybe more. She can't do that without the support. And so where the political pressure will come, it might not be on future coalition directly, it could be indirectly on funders.
Absolutely.
They're not independent of, because a lot of times funders are foundations, and foundations are attached
Corporations.
to a corporation that is being pressured to dismantle certain things, and then it trickles down and it impacts a Corryn Freeman and your future coalition.
Yes.
That's right. That's true. And that's, I also think that, and while I'm committed to doing this Work the Future Coalition, we need to be in community with each other now more than ever, right? Because even the institutions, the C3s and the C4s that have supplemented things that we couldn't get from the government, right? Those are under attack. Our funding is going to be, it is anticipated that our funding will decrease, right? So how are we being in community with one another? How are we a part of mutual aid groups? Do you know your neighbors? Who are the people who live next to you? Do you know them? Right? And how are you accounting for the resources you have? And are we thinking about ways that we can keep each other safe in this very, 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 very uncertain time?
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
And that's why I advocated earlier, and Impeccable picked up on it. Oh, I think Corryn did. This is not just about the Afro. We need a free and independent press that's going to speak truth to power. So if we take our civil rights organizations for granted, if we take our Black newspapers for granted, regardless of how they're getting the news out, some are still getting it out in print. That's fine. Okay, that's what. But most are not. Most are doing it, using the digital and social platforms, right? But we can't take each other for granted.
We can't.
We had to be intentional about supporting those whose policies align with what we believe is best for us individually and collectively.
That's a perfect intro for the afro.com. If you don't have a subscription, we are family owned, operated, speaking truth to power for over 132 years. We are asking for your support. For less than 2 Uber Eats, $40 a year, you can be digitally tech up-to-date sexy. If you want the paper as well and you like to feel something in your hands, for $100 you can get both. You can get it to your email and you can get it delivered straight to any address in the world. Wherever the mail goes, your Afro can be there. We need your support. They can't executive order anything over here at the Afro. We are going to speak the truth for our people for as long as we have breath, and hopefully the future generations have breath. And that these are the things that you have to have a place to come and say, okay, what's real? Because if you don't have a place that you can come to balance or counterbalance all of this foolishness, it's like, don't fall for the banana in the tailpipe. Like, come on. It's like, wake up. You read something and you see one little clip and then you go back and you speak it like it's true. You ain't fact checked anything. You just listen to somebody say something and then you go and you spread that same thing, and then all of a sudden it's so much foolishness and confusion spreading and nobody knows what's true. But when you need to figure out what's true, come on back to the Black press, to the Black media, to the Black organizations. Man, hopefully all of the Black organizations are doing what they're supposed to do, because some of them are under a check too, and they're going to do some other things too. That's a whole nother show, check the checker that checks the check. But go to afro.com, y'all. We still here 132 years, and we will always can speak the truth on behalf of Black people and people of color all around the world. That's my TED Talk. And now we're going to get on the box. I know we could talk about this. You advocates, if you're motivated to do some advocacy, please do it. Even if you're just doing it right to the person next to you. You don't have to, get on the corner and preach, but get on the corner and preach. All right, let me just say, I'm going to push you to the corner. Get on the corner, because now's the time. They're trying to shut us up. They're trying to close us out. Come on. We made it through more rough times than this. No electricity. It was so cold the other week. I'm like, our people slept all together in those houses. All the whole family was in one room, and it was still that cold back then. Come on, we can definitely make it through whatever we're going through now, because God is still who He is, regardless. And if you forget that part, then you doomed anyway. So I'm off the box. I was actually on the chicken box, y'all. Y'all didn't even know it. But Dr. Draper, you can get on the box where you can speak about advocacy or our guest. And thank you, Corryn, for sharing.
I want to thank Corryn Freeman for being with us today. And I'm hoping that we're listening, not just hearing what she's saying. What I heard you say, Corryn, and you can correct me when you get on the box, is that you're preparing young people for the future in a way that the things that we think about now, it's not a reaction to necessarily what's happening now. It's a planning for how it actually changes, right? I heard you say 2028, but with things that have to start now. And so pouring into young people who have a thirst and a hunger for some of these things. Some of them don't know they have a thirst and that hunger. They don't know what it is, but helping them to see that, because they are our present, they are our future, and coupled with those of us who are older, to provide some guidance. They have a lot of energy, a lot of knowledge, a lot of intellect, and desire to live in a better world than they were born into. And so we want to thank you for that work. You're serving as a convener, it sounds like, for groups all over the country. You're providing resources in terms of technical assistance, resources in terms of financial resources, resources in terms of advocacy, yes, but also inspiration. And so I just want to commend you for doing that. The environmental work is so key in every city in the country, especially on the other side of the tracks where the factories were built and where Black and brown people tended to put down our stakes to live, whether it's in Baltimore City, and I'm sure there's some parts in Florida that are the same way, or in Georgia where Impeccable is the same way. I didn't understand what it meant to live on the other side of the tracks, because I didn't know that the railroad tracks were designed like that. But that's where the factories were. That's where the workers were, who were workers of color, and that's where the environmental issues still are in our cities. And so thank you for the work that you're doing. Thank you for the young people. Whatever we can do to help to publicize. The other thing about our organizations like yours is that a lot of people know your good work who are doing it with you. We need to find a way to make sure that they know about it beyond where the work is being done. So kudos to you, and I'm off the box.
Okay. So Corryn, thank you for coming in. We really appreciate it. It was a very good conversation, spirited conversation, which I always appreciate. So thank you. Just a couple of things, just to sort of touch on something we made a point about. Now, as of today, Trump moves to fire members of the EEOC and National Labor Board, right? These are people who are trying to keep things even as they can, and to help labor and obviously equal opportunity. So these things don't just happen in a vacuum. They are very much deliberate, and they happen in real time. Also, you are probably the first and maybe the only guest we're ever going to have that referenced the Air Bud rule. So I appreciate that. As a kind of a funny movie person, I just thought that was great. But I always like to give a quote that are in reference to what we're talking about. And this is from someone I've never heard of, but I think it's really interesting. There's a Roman poet from 43 BC named Ovid. And I think this is really good. Quote, "Dripping water hollows out a stone, not through force, but through persistence." And I think that is exactly what the type of work that you do, which is, it's not, I feel like advocacy is a lovely term, but in a lot of ways, I feel like you hone people to move them in a direction to be persistent in their actions, right? I don't know what the proper term would be, but advocate or doing advocacy work works for now until we can find a different term. But I think a lot of times with politics, especially, people like to sort of hit the rock with force every 4 years. And then they go, all right, that full effort and I'm done. But the real change comes from that persistence of, it's not every 4 years, it's every single day. And if you're going to defend your democracy, you're going to save your planet and everything else, you cannot afford, unfortunately, to take days off. It's just not the way the world works. And we have to be not only advocates for change, but we also have to be advocates for ourselves and for people who cannot be advocates for themselves. Whether they're disabled or, can't speak to these particular issues or don't realize that these issues are affecting them quite seriously and directly. So I appreciate your work. I think we all do. And I appreciate the Future Coalition. And I'm really look forward to seeing your name mentioned a lot when young people are trying to find a place to sort of hone this fire and this passion that they have, because they have it. They just need to be able to direct it. So thank you.
Well, thank you all so much for having me.
You are now. I'm gonna give you a box drum roll here, chicken box drum roll. There you go.
Well, thank you so much. It was such a pleasure having this. It felt like a family conversation. I really enjoyed speaking with you all and telling you guys about the work of Future Coalition. And as my dad would say, work equals effort over time. Consistency is a choice, and consistency is what builds, the legacy that we look back and say, look at that, right? So continuing to have effort over time, sustained effort over time is what will get us to the place, plus our ability to vision and really drive the boat in that direction. But the one thing that I really want to leave folks with now is, yes, things are scary here in America. This is an unprecedented moment for us, and our democracy is being tested, and you may be fearful. And kind of like Impeccable said, I think about the ancestors, and I remember that my ancestors went through this transatlantic slave trade. They survived. They survived that. They survived 400 years of slavery, right? We survived Jim Crow racism. We survived. And that we can survive this, and our ability to survive is about our ability to remain connected and grounded in community. And that's for all of us, right? So knowing that we will get through this moment as long as we remain connected to one another and grounded in who we are. We will be victorious ultimately.
Man, that's a mic drop. If y'all just tuned in, go back and look at this. Share with somebody. Hit share. You share enough silly videos of people falling down and farting and all that stuff. So now it's time to share some videos about some advocacy. What y'all laughing at? You didn't see those silly videos where they all running into something or doing something silly. We share everything, but let's get some balance and let's share some truth to power. Share this with somebody so they can. They like to say they woke, but sometimes I think they just like to say they woke. So maybe this one little thing could help them wake up a little bit more, or maybe they sleepwalking. Let's keep moving. Afro family, Corryn, we're gonna pray for your work. I know you say you want to come back to Columbia sometime, or back to the Maryland area and pick your snow shovel back up. Are you sure?
I am. I miss it. All my best friends are there, so.
Well, then come on back, because the digital world, you can do it from anywhere. You can do it from anywhere.
Don't tempt me with a good time. Don't tempt me.
I'm tempting you. Come on back. You got a black governor. I mean, we the blackest state.
I'll tell you also, Brooks, like when I think about Westmore to Ron DeSantis, I'm like, oh my gosh. But that's a whole other
whole different conversation.
Right. Thank you for having me, y'all. It was a pleasure.
Absolutely. Call the senior, everybody. They love to hear from you. Don't text them. Just call them up. Tell them you love them while they're still here before the funeral. Matter of fact, you don't even know if you might beat them. So just call them up and just tell them you love them. Anyway, thanks everybody tuning in. Jewel, Craig, everybody, Future Coalition, everybody who's decided to leave a comment and share. We appreciate you. We're going to keep doing it for the next 132 years. Maybe not on this platform, because I ain't going to talk too bad about them. Whatever. We need our own platform, people. We need our own black social media news platform. Maybe that's the Afro's charge. Who knows? Because they want to algorithm us to death on all of these other things. They try to tell us, even though they're stealing all our information, they tell us who we can speak to and how many of our friends that we let on their platform we can talk to. That's the stupidest thing in the world. But anyway, we get back to that. That sounds like a good chicken box. What'd you say, Dr. Draper?
I say it's a great chicken box. I think we ought to bring Tyrone on so he can talk about his metaverse, and which is believe
that's Tyrone Tabor, and not Erykah Badu's Tyrone. Okay, we never bring him.
No, not that Tyrone. All right,
Let's do it. All right, that's the next show, producers. Y'all hear it. Until next time, God willing, we'll see you again next week. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.